Welcome back. Today, our theme is sun, which is very exciting. I'm a huge space nerd. I minored in astronomy and astrophysics in college, so this is a special place in my heart for this one. So let's begin by deleting the default cube as usual, and we're also going to delete this light because we're going to make a sun, and the sun's going to have its own light. This is based off of two tutorials that I found online. I'm kind of merging them a little bit and then adding a couple of changes. I'll show them to you first. The first one is this How Tuts Blender beginner tutorial on making the solar system, particularly this part 2 about making the sun. He made this a couple years ago with a previous version of Blender, and so adding bloom effects and stuff like that I kind of had to change. So what you'll see today is a kind of updated version, and then this 5-minute Blender YouTube tutorial about creating stars in the background. So I'll link both of these in the description. Shout out to both of those creators for the awesome tutorials. So let's begin by creating a sphere. Most suns are roughly sphere-shaped. You might be like, how could they not be a sphere? Well, if you think about any rotating body or any celestial body, whether that be planets, moons, or suns, they all have some sort of spin, and that spin is around kind of what we would call the equator, right? The widest part of the sphere. So by the way, we're setting segments to 128 and rings to 64 just to kind of keep this smooth. We want it to be relatively smooth, and we shade smooth right after. And now we have pretty much a sphere. So when we have a rotating sphere, you have certain kind of like fluid effects because suns are made out of mostly gas, and in physics and engineering, we consider fluids and gases to be liquids because they both abide by a lot of the same rules. I will get to that in a second. Let me just continue here. So with the sun, what we want to do is create a material, and this material is going to be basically the general color that we're going for, but it's not going to be exactly it. So typically when you look into the sky, like if I were to ask you what color do you think the sun is, you'd probably say yellow. It's not really yellow, it's more white. I mean, it releases a bunch of different colors and wavelengths, but because of the way our atmosphere kind of distorts it, and the wavelengths that are most common, it appears as like yellowish. It's also because like you only really can see the color of the sun when it's at the atmosphere, otherwise you're not really supposed to look at the sun. And so when we look, like right when it's on the horizon, it's red. So you kind of think, oh, well, if it's red on the horizon and it gets kind of more orangey the higher it goes, well, maybe it's probably yellow during the day. So it's a reasonable assumption, even if it's not super accurate. Okay, from this color, we want to set the alpha to 0.5. And this makes it a bit transparent, which will be important later because we're going to add a light right in the center of the sphere. We also want to set the emission strength to 0.5. No, to 1 rather, and set the color of this also to kind of a similar yellow, light yellow color. Okay, we then want to size up our sphere, so we can do this and kind of move this out. And what the tutorials recommended is that you set it to about 15 by 15 by 15. Of course, you can set it to whatever you want. It's more dependent on what's going to be around the sphere rather than the sphere itself. For our purposes today, it doesn't really matter because for the stars that we're going to put in the background, they're infinitely far away. And so there's really nothing relative to this size. But in the future, I'm probably going to want to make like solar systems and, model transits and other cool stuff. And so it can be useful to know your size ahead of time and to choose your size based off of what else you want to do. Okay, I mentioned that we wanted to create a light inside of the sphere. So let's do that now. We'll go into add and create a point light. You might think, why not add a sun? Because the sun has its own kind of special features. It's not meant to be a space sun. This is like a sun you would get on Earth, basically where it's a bunch of parallel lines all hitting you from roughly the same direction. Anyways, forget about that for now. What do we want to set the power to? Well, I mean, you might be surprised, but you want the power to be really high. This sun emits a ton of light, and so we're going to set it to 1 billion. So there's that, and then right now it is condensed. All of this power is emitting just from this one point, and so it's basically all white. But what we can do to kind of diffuse it a little bit, and you won't be able to see the diffusivity right now or how much it diffuses it, but you set this radius to 9. And you can kind of see now that instead of emitting all the light from one spot, it emits it from this entire sphere. And so we'll see what happens with that in just a second. Okay, we now want to, I believe, parent the point to the sphere. So click that, Control P, and then you can just do normal object. And so now we have a sphere with the point light source inside of it. From there, we want to go to back to here, back to the material properties. We want to scroll all the way down to settings, and this is part of the changes that have been made since the previous tutorial that I talked about dealing with the sun. In the past, there were like settings within here that directly you could adjust bloom and stuff like that, but now you have to do a couple of extra steps. So I'll show you that in a second. But for now, what we want to do is we want to go to render method and make sure that it's on dithered. So for me, it's already on dithered, but just make sure that you see dithered right here. We now want to go to this little orange square that's object properties. We click on that. And I believe it's visibility. Okay, yeah, so you go to visibility and look at ray visibility here. We don't want a shadow because the sun doesn't have a shadow, right? It's emitting in every direction. That's one of the properties of stars, is that they emit roughly equally in every direction. So we turn off shadow. And what that will do is it'll basically make sure that we don't get any, asymmetric emission of light. So it emits equally in every direction. Okay. Now this is the confusing part, or I guess the part that really is different from the previous tutorial, is that we go into the compositing workspace. And this is a little daunting. It was daunting for me when I first did it because I had never touched a compositing workspace before, but it's good to get experience with these kinds of things. There's only one way to learn, and that's by doing it. And so here it's completely empty, and you're like, well, what do I do if I go to add and any of these things? Like, they're all grayed out, and if you click them, it's like, I can't add anything. Oh, what's happening? What's happening? It's actually... Don't panic. You just go up here where it says use nodes and you click this little checkbox. Look at that. We have some nodes already in place. And so we're going to use these to kind of add the bloom effect that we previously added just in the normal layout mode. So what we're going to do is we're going to shift A to add, and we're going to add glare. So you just type in glare, hit glare, and just drop it right here along this line in between render layers and this branch right there. So you just let it do that. It'll automatically connect. And what you want to do is go to streaks, where it says streaks, and we're going to change that to bloom. So bloom is the effect that we want. We're going to change this tint to, you know, a similar light yellow shade that we kind of want our sun to emit. Again, it doesn't have to be super deep yellow. If you want your sun to emit other colors, it totally can. Not all suns emit the same colors. It depends on their temperature, actually. There's a cool relationship called Wien's law, or Wien's law. I don't know the pronunciation of the guy, which is kind of a shame. I should know his how to pronounce his name. But basically, it relates the temperature of the black body, which is, we consider any sun, when we approximate it as a black body, all that means is that it's taking all of its energy that's being kind of, that's coming from fusion in the core, and it's using that as kind of like light that's emitting. Of course, it's not all the energy is going to light emission, but we can kind of estimate it because the general engine that fuels our stars all throughout the universe is that we have gravity pulling all these particles in, and then radiation pressure pushing them out. And the reason that stars last for so long, on the order of like billions of years, is because we have all this space dust that gets sucked in by gravity, and it gets sucked in super tight, and it gets sucked in actually so tight that the nuclear bonds that hold together the atoms are overcome, and you get fusion reactions inside the core of the sun. And every time there's a fusion reaction, you're basically taking either like 2 hydrogens into a helium, or there's a bunch of other cycles. But you have these little particles smaller than an atom. They get released when that fusion happens, and those particles add up, and that adds up to radiation pressure. So anyway, sorry for that small tangent. Hope you found that interesting. What we're going to do now is go to layout, and go back to our rendered view, and you see there's this little drop down menu over here. So right now you're like, well, why is it still white? Like, isn't that a little scary? Yeah, it is a little scary, but all we have to do to make sure that our compositing shows up is go from, look at this drop down right next to the renderer, and then all the way at the bottom where it says compositor, switch it from disabled to always. So we click on always, and then look at that, we have a sun emitting light. How cool is that? Okay, now we want to switch over to basically get a star backdrop for our sun. And so what we're going to do is we're going to switch over to this world tab over here. So you see it looks like a little earth with a line going through it. So what this does is it basically says, okay, forget about any of the objects that we've created. This is the background that you're kind of building within. And so this color that is normally, whatever your background is, because we're in space and there's very little, light other than from stars, we want to set it to, pitch black as it can go. We can also, if you would like, and I think it's nice just for the visuals here, you can turn off, is it this one? Yeah, you can turn off the overlay, and that makes it so you really feel like you're kind of like lost in space. We'll keep it on for now, but at the end of the video I'll turn it off so you can kind of get an idea of what it looks like as a whole, because it's pretty cool. Okay, we now want to go to our shading mode up here, our shading workspace. So look at the top tab in between texture paint and animation, go to shading, and we'll see that we have these basic shaders that correspond to the material property that we made for our sun. But we don't want to work with our sun right now, we want to work with the background. And so what we do is we come down here where it says object with this little drop down, you click the drop down, and you want to select world right here. So the same world symbol that appears over here, we want to click it over here. So we click on world. One thing we can do to make sure that we're seeing what we want to see is, for whatever reason, when you go to shading mode, it automatically switches back to material preview. I guess not for whatever reason. I mean, it makes sense. You want to see your material probably most of the time when you're shading, just isolated. But in our case, we actually want this background. So we go to rendered mode. Again, don't worry about the white star. It'll fix itself. The same thing always happens when you go to a new mode where you have to click this drop down and go to compositor and switch it to always. Okay, we now have this, and so we want to create stars. How do you create stars? Well, we're not going to copy the actual location of all the stars in the sky. As fun as that would be, and as cool of a project as that would be, that would take a long time. And there's a much quicker way to do it, which is just to kind of approximate them as random throughout the night sky. And so what we can do to approximate it is Shift A, and we're going to add a Voronoi texture. And we'll add it right over here to the left of background. And we'll click this distance output and drag it from the Voronoi texture to the color input of the background. And you'll now see that if we kind of rotate our camera, you get these weird kind of like blobs that appear. But it's kind of the inverse color of what we're going for, right? It's like mostly white with a little bit of black. So we're going to change a couple of settings to get what we want. So first, what we want to do is change our scale. These blobs are a little big, and there's usually more stars in the night sky than just that. So if we change our scale to around 200, and you can play with this value, it doesn't have to be exactly 200. Anywhere up from like 75, I found works pretty well. That's what they said in the video, and that's went through my experiments. That's what I found too. So now you see this kind of is starting to look a little bit like what you would expect, right? Instead of white stars, we have black stars right now, but we're about to fix that, so don't worry too much. And so how do we fix that? Okay, let's drag out our Voronoi texture just a little bit away from background because we're going to add something in between. And what are we going to add? We're going to add something called map range. And what map range will do is it'll help us switch from black dots on white to white dots on black. And so the main values that we're concerned with when making this change are this from min and from max. So right now, from max goes up to 1 and from min is to 0. And if we want to invert everything, we basically want to make sure that from min is larger than from max. And so what we can do to make this happen is we can set from min to maybe like 0.05 or so, and then from max to 0. And so now, look at that, we have some stars. Again, it's not perfect, but the stars exist. For just a second, I'm going to turn off this compositor just so you can kind of see the background stars, but I'll add it back. Don't worry. Okay. we want to go back to our Voronoi texture now, and you see where it says F1. If we change that to smooth F1, we'll get a bit of more of a distribution in the kind of apparent brightnesses of all these stars. So instead of getting a bunch of dots that are all the same size, now we can see there's a couple that appear bigger and a couple that appear smaller. And when you rotate the screen, you get some weird effects, but don't worry about that. Okay. If we want to add even more of a kind of variation of star sizes and add more stars in general, which I think it would be nice, what we can do is just drag all this up. We're going to need a little more space, so just make sure you have enough space. So that's why I kind of dragged this whole system up. We're going to highlight map range and Voronoi texture. I'm going to hit Shift D to duplicate it, and then just going to drag it a little bit down. And what we'll do with the new Voronoi texture is we'll change our scale from 200 to 350, and this will create a bunch of small stars. Doesn't necessarily appear right now because, again, we haven't connected it to our main branch, but don't worry about that because we will. And then we want to go within our map range, and we will change 2 max to, let's say, 2. Oh, and I forgot, in this original map range, we want to set 2 max to maybe like 5 or so. Yeah, and that adds a bunch more stars, and you can see they're much brighter now, and so that looks cool. And we want to add maybe a couple dimmer stars into that, and so that's what this bottom section is for. Okay, we now want to take our background and world outputs and kind of move them over. And you might be like, well, why are we doing that? Because we need to combine these two before it goes into background. And so what we can do is Shift A, and we'll have an add converter, which basically takes 2 values and turns it into 1. So we take the result from this map range. We take the result from this map range, and we also have to cut this. How do I do that? Cut links. Sorry, bud. Okay, we've added these. Then we want to take I believe it's a noise texture. Yeah, okay, so what you could do first is just add the value from add to the background. And this looks pretty good. I mean, like, I don't know, to me this appears like a background, but if we want to kind of pop off and do a little more just to make it look all that much nicer, we can add a noise texture, Shift A, noise texture, and then we'll also add, after that, a multiply node. And so what the multiply node will do is it'll go in between add and background, and so it basically takes this input that we previously had from all of these stars, and then it multiplies them by random noise. So each star individually, or not, it is kind of each star individually gets modified, but because it's a computer, it's able to do it really fast. So what we want to do is we add this noise texture. The FAC goes into the bottom value here, and we can change the scale of our noise. Maybe let's change it to about 10. And we can also change the detail to roughly 20. You can kind of play around with these values. It doesn't have to be exact. But now you can see we have like really, populated background of our stars, which is pretty cool. And so now if we go back to our layout and we turn off our overlay, look at that. We have our star sitting among the other stars. And I think that's pretty cool, and it kind of builds you a good basis if you ever want to make a solar system or any space scenes. You can kind of have this background, have a star, have something like that. Adds to the ambiance if you ever want to make, something science fiction of that sort. Anyways, that's pretty much it for right now. We have about a minute left. Let's see where our camera's pointing. I guess that could be a... Oh, man, yeah, okay. So we want to move back. Whoa. Okay, this is probably the wrong way to do that. Let's, G... Shift tilde maybe? Yeah. So let's kind of just move... Oh, I want to make sure we can kind of see this emission while also seeing the stars behind it. It's kind of weird that you see like a corona shape here. But I don't know exactly what causes that, but nice. Yeah, let's kind of go like this, and then we can change maybe the, whoa, oh, I didn't hit enter, my bad. Once we do this, let's like, okay, maybe that's a little too bright, but we can right click and change the focus length so that we get more of the background stars in there. And now if we go like this, and we go to render image, hopefully we'll get a nice picture of our star. Look at that. Beautiful. All right, hope you enjoyed that one and found it useful, and thanks for watching.